One of the worst insults that you can hurl at someone these days is to call them lazy, right? You know, we value strong work ethic, we value hard work, and we generally like to think that if you work hard and play by the rules, you will make a lot. Your wealth will grow. We generally like to think that those who make more than others are those who work harder than others. And so sometimes when folks just don't seem to be able to make ends meet, it's real easy just to presume that, well, they're lazy. And yes, strong work ethic is absolutely important and essential. John Wesley was the founder of the Methodist movement that is expressed through the United Methodist Church. John Wesley, he was an 18th century British priest of the Church of England. That's where he did his ministry. He had this phrase that's going to kind of be part of this three-week pledge drive. Make all you can, save all you can, and give all you can. And so today, it's the make all you can part. And nobody could accuse John Wesley of being lazy. In fact, if you look at his journals and you look at his writings and you look at what others said of him, some might say, hey, John, maybe you should sleep a little more. Maybe you should rest a little bit more. But nobody could accuse him of being lazy. And yet when John Wesley preached this sermon, this three-part make all you can, save all you can, give all you can, it was part of a sermon called The Use of Money. He actually described limits, both on work and then earning money in general, that was part of the make all you can. See, implicit in that statement was make all you can with integrity, with justice. Make all you can, what John Wesley said was, make all you can, but if you know that for your health, the work you're doing is not sustainable, maybe you need to slow down or find something else. Make all you can, yes, but if the work that you're doing or the ways that you are investing is exploiting others, is keeping others poor, making sure that others don't have the opportunity to make all they can, but instead, because they don't make as much money, we call them lazy. If the ways in which you invest lead to that, then that is not what you should be striving for. That is not the kind of wealth you should be making and gaining and earning. See, brothers and sisters, as we see in today's reading from the prophet Amos, our desire to work hard and accumulate resources, it's not a bad desire, but we are to make all we can with justice and with integrity, because God condemns unjust gain that oppresses the poor and the vulnerable. Merle was right about Amos's background. He was a shepherd. And even though he preached in the northern territory of the northern kingdom of Israel, but he actually was from just a little bit south of Jerusalem, in the southern kingdom of Judah. And, excuse me. And he served, last week, if you were here last week, there was Elijah, right? The prophet Elijah. We reflected on him and on his ministry and on his experiences with God. Amos was more or less about 100 years after the prophet Elijah. And nobody can question a shepherd's work ethic, right? Amos working long hours in the field and finding time to go around these different places and sell. And shepherds, while interestingly enough, they were among the poorest and most vulnerable, but they were also an exalted profession. After all, Abraham, the father of many nations, was a shepherd. His grandson Jacob, who would become Israel, the father of the 12 tribes of Israel, was a shepherd. Moses, when he was in exile, was a shepherd. And King David, see this in 1 Samuel chapter 16, verse 11, that he almost got skipped, or his family, his father tried to kind of look past him when the prophet Samuel was coming around to anoint the new king. That David's father was like, oh, you want to talk to David? He's out with the sheep. Right? He almost got skipped over because of his work. So it was even though it was not a well-compensated profession, it was a well-respected profession. And nobody could question Amos's work ethic. But Amos questioned the ethics of those who became rich by exploiting the poor. Today's vision, it's about a basket of fruit, which might seem random. I tried to find how Amos connected that with, and it might be later in the book, but it's kind of just, there's this basket of fruit, and then talking about exploitation. But then you think about what fruit means in the biblical narrative. Fruit is a sign of prosperity and life. At the beginning, in Eden, how did the first people eat? They ate from a fruit tree, right? From fruit trees. There was only one tree that they weren't allowed to eat from. The rest, they ate from. We see in Micah chapter 4, verse 4, a phrase that some of you may know from the musical Hamilton. Hamilton was quoting George Washington, who was quoting Micah chapter 4, verse 4, about a vision for a society at peace where everyone would lie under their own fruit tree and no one would be afraid. So fruit symbolizes prosperity and life, and yet there is such a thing as bad fruit. There is such a thing as ill-gotten fruit. And that kind of fruit leads to God's condemnation. We see in Proverbs chapter 16, verse 11 and 23, that God condemned what was called unjust or unequal weights or scales. And you're like, what does that even mean? Given the currency at the time, things were based on weight. Value, currency was based on weight. And a lot of times, those who were wealthy and who exchanged money would manipulate the scales so that they could get more than they were supposed to. That's ill-gotten fruit. We see in Jeremiah chapter 6, verses 13 to 15, that Jeremiah laments that from the least to the greatest of them, everyone is greedy for unjust gain. Goes on to say everyone deals falsely. That is bad fruit that is ill-gotten fruit. And so God condemns it. And we see this vision of condemnation, this vision of judgment. And some of these experiences resonate with prior experiences in Israel's history. It talks about the darkness in the middle of the day. Right? Those, who are familiar, somewhat familiar with the biblical witness, know that that was one of the last plagues that God inflicted upon Egypt when God was liberating the Israelites, because the Israelites were slaves. They were being exploited. The Egyptians were making all they could unjustly on the backs of the Israelites. And one of the plagues was darkness. And so God condemns unjust gain that oppresses the poor and vulnerable. Yes, we're to make all we can with justice and with integrity. And Jesus and his followers believed similar things about work ethic, but also justice and integrity. Jesus did want us to maximize potential. We see in the parable of the talents, Matthew chapter 25, verse 14 to 30, one servant gets 10 talents, one gets 5, one gets 1. And the one who gets condemned is so scared to do anything with it that he buries it in the ground. Buries his 1 talent in the ground. And that doesn't just apply to finances and money. Of course, Jesus is a parable. It's about spiritual good. But we can apply that lesson to that too. That if we don't do anything with the resources that we have, they're not going to grow. We're not going to make all we can. And I don't think that honors God. We also see later in the New Testament a famous line that, frankly, I think is often overused, but it's still in the scriptures. It's important. 2 Thessalonians chapter 3, verse 6 through 13, where the Apostle Paul is chewing out those who would sit idly by and benefit from the community's work while giving nothing to it. So Paul used the phrase, those who do not work will not eat. Because Paul is saying, no, you've got to put your best effort forth. You've got to contribute. You've got to work. And so work ethic is important and maximizing potential is important to Jesus and his followers, both spiritually and materially. But like John Wesley, Jesus and his followers declared God's condemnation upon those who gain wealth by exploiting others, those who gain wealth by setting up situations where others cannot make all that they can. Jesus condemned the religious leaders of his day. We see in Matthew chapter 23, especially verse 23, where it says, "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you tithe mint, dill, and cumin, and have neglected the weightier matters of the law, justice and mercy and faith." And then elsewhere we see that a New Testament letter that is attributed to Jesus' brother, James, says the following, "Come now, you rich people, weep and wail for the miseries that are coming to you. Your riches have rotted, and your clothes are moth-eaten. Your gold and silver have rusted, and their rust will be evidence against you, and it will eat your flesh like fire. You have laid up treasure for the last days. Listen, the wages of the laborers who mowed your fields, which you kept back by fraud, cry out, and the cries of the harvesters have reached the ears of the Lord of hosts." And being a faithful follower of Jesus, John Wesley, again, the founder of the Methodist movement from 18th century England, had similar views. It's why he encouraged strong work ethic. He had a strong work ethic. But it's why he opposed slavery, which was legal in the colonies at the time. It's why he opposed child labor, which was perfectly legal at the time. And it's why he opposed and sought to improve the conditions of the coal mines. Because the conditions of the coal mines were such that the miners, even if they weren't being compensated well, they wouldn't live very long. And so John Wesley saw that as wrong. He saw that as examples of exploiting others to gain all you can. And so you are to gain and make all you can with integrity and justice. And so some questions that I think we need to ask ourselves, brothers and sisters, there's no perfect job. There's no way to perfectly alleviate ourselves from all kind of dilemmas or ethical dilemmas and such. I think of the investments that are in my retirement portfolio. Y'all, as part of my pay, contribute to retirement. I contribute to my retirement, and I'm grateful to have that account. And there are certain investments that the United Methodist Church refuses to make for this reason. We don't invest in gambling. We don't invest in weapons. We don't invest in alcohol or other non-medical, illicit drugs. We don't do those things because we don't want to make all we can at the expense of others. And yet, anyone who knows how investing in mixed portfolios work know that if you dig in the details too much, you're going to see some companies that you're like, oh, I don't know if I like supporting that industry, right? And so there is no perfect work or investment that is free of all kind of conflict or free of all dilemma. But I think we should ask ourselves, does our work and investment noticeably, visibly harm yourself or others? Or does your work and your investment help others to make all they can? See, brothers and sisters, too many people think these days that too many people think that that how one earns money is somehow exempt from their discipleship. And in fact, I know some folks, and of course this wouldn't happen in this church. Talk about other churches here, where perhaps they're quite wealthy and perhaps they gained their money by means that they're not proud of. But sure, just like if they give their tithe, like, okay, that's fine, right? And yes, we want you to give generously. I would love it if everybody could give well more than they give, and we would be able to do so many great ministries. I want folks to work hard and be proud of that work and get compensated for that work. I want folks to make good investment choices that build themselves and others up. But no, I don't want the church to have blood money. Because Jesus does not want the church to have blood money. Jesus died for our whole selves. And he especially died for those who suffer injustice and oppression. And so the demands of discipleship, yes, include hard work, but they include hard work with integrity and justice. So yes, earn all you can. Put in good work. Put in study. Those who are going to school might be like, well, I don't know, I'm limited in what I do. Studying helps you to be able to do what you believe God is calling you to do as a profession. So study, that's part of your work. Be creative. Have perseverance. Do these things that help you make all you can. But do so with integrity and justice so that others can make all they can as well. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen.